There is a pain unlike any other pain. It's the pain that comes not from the loss of a stranger or the betrayal of a friend, but from the turning away of the one who once whispered promises in your ear, touched your soul with their warmth, and made you believe that forever was real. When your spouse, the person who once looked into your eyes with love and laughter, begins to speak with contempt, to react with coldness, or even express hatred, it feels like your heart is being slowly torn apart. You wake up beside someone you once felt safe with, but now the silence is deafening. Their words, if spoken, are laced with sarcasm or anger. Their presence feels more like a stranger's than a soulmate's. And inside you ask yourself again and again, how did we get here? How did the one who once loved me come to feel such hate? And is there any hope left for us? Let me start by saying something you may not have heard in a while. You are not alone. And your situation is not hopeless, even if it feels that way right now. I have sat across from thousands of men and women in my years of working in marriage restoration. People who believed their marriage was dead and buried, the love long gone, and the hatred too strong. But I have also seen love resurrected. I have seen marriages saved. Even when one spouse had already moved out, had already uttered the words, "I hate you," had already given up. So if you're here because your spouse's heart has hardened, because their eyes no longer shine when they look at you, because their words cut instead of heal, I want to tell you that there is a path forward. And though the journey may be painful, though the steps may challenge everything inside you, love is still possible. Restoration is still possible. And it begins with a deep soul-level truth. Hate is not the opposite of love. Indifference is, which means if there is hate, there is still feeling. And where there is feeling, there's the possibility of redemption. But let me also be honest. The transformation of hate into love is not about magic words or manipulation. It's not about begging, pleading, or guilt-tripping your spouse back into affection. Those tactics backfire every time. What I will walk with you through and what I want to begin with in this moment is a deeply emotional, spiritually grounded understanding of the human heart and the hope that still lives even in the darkest seasons of your marriage. You see, hate, when it shows up in a marriage, rarely begins as hate. It is more often a twisted evolution of disappointment, unmet needs, resentment, or repeated hurts that were never healed. Your spouse might not even know why they feel this way anymore. They may have hardened their heart as a form of self-protection. Maybe they believe they've been unheard, unloved, or unseen for too long. Maybe there were betrayals or wounds that festered in silence. Or maybe, and this is often the case, they're projecting their own inner turmoil outward and blaming you for the pain they feel inside. This is why I don't want you to define yourself by their hate. Their current feelings are real, yes, but they are also fluid. And more importantly, they are not always rooted in truth. People hurt people when they themselves are hurting. And if you're on the receiving end of that pain, it can feel like you're being crushed beneath 1,000 invisible weights. But I urge you, don't carry their hate as your identity. You are more than how your spouse currently sees you. I know what you might be thinking. Joe, how can I possibly love someone who hates me? How do I fight for a marriage when I'm the only one still fighting? And I hear you. I really do. But here's something I've learned, both in my own life and in the lives of thousands of couples I've worked with. Love doesn't start with emotion. It starts with decision. If you wait to feel love before acting in love, you may never move. But if you choose to act in love, even when it's hard, even when you're hurting, you create the space for transformation. You lay the groundwork for healing. Now, I'm not talking about tolerating abuse. If your spouse's hate is violent, demeaning, or destructive in ways that compromise your safety or dignity, you must draw boundaries and seek help. Love never requires enduring harm. But if your spouse's hate shows up as bitterness, withdrawal, accusations, or even cold silence, there is still an opportunity to reach beneath the surface. There is still a way to reawaken what has been buried. And it begins with understanding their heart, not just your own pain. What does your spouse truly feel? What have they been carrying silently that turned their love into resentment? And here's the hardest part. How might you have unintentionally contributed to that pain? Not to blame yourself, but to take responsibility for your side of the story with humility and maturity. This is not weakness. This is strength. The courage to reflect honestly is the first act of rebuilding. Then, with that clarity, you can begin to live in a way that evokes love, not by demanding it, but by demonstrating it, by living with integrity, by creating moments of connection, even small ones, by showing up day after day with a quiet, steady presence that says, I see you're hurt. I won't give up on us. And I'm willing to become the kind of person this marriage needs. I've watched spouses who once screamed, I hate you, break down in tears months later, confessing, I didn't really hate you. I just didn't know how to say I was hurt. I've seen hardened hearts melt in the presence of consistent kindness. I've witnessed marriages on the brink turn into marriages that flourish again. And the truth is, you don't need your spouse to change first. That's a myth that traps so many. When they soften, I'll open my heart. When they apologize, I'll try again. But love that heals is the love that goes first. Not in a way that grovels or gives up its worth, but in a way that is bold, consistent, courageous, and rooted in truth. So if your spouse seems to hate you right now, I want you to breathe in this truth. This is not the end of your story. There is more, there is hope, and the very fact that you're reading this now means you still care. That spark inside you, that longing to turn hate into love, is sacred. And I believe with everything in me that if you are willing to walk the path of transformation with wisdom, humility, and strength, you can see love restored. Let's begin that journey together. When hate begins to show up in a marriage, it rarely appears out of nowhere. It is not usually born overnight, nor does it arrive without cause. And yet, when it hits you, when the person you love looks at you with disgust, withdraws emotionally, or even utters the words, I hate you, it can feel as though a tidal wave of rejection has knocked you completely off your feet. You may stand there stunned, thinking, how did we get to this place? The truth is, hate in marriage is almost never the root problem. It is the symptom of something deeper, something unresolved, something long ignored, or something deeply misunderstood. The one thing we often overlook, especially when we're on the receiving end of such painful emotions, is this. Hate is frequently fueled by pain. Not always, but very often. That pain may stem from years of disappointment, unmet emotional needs, unresolved conflicts, or lingering resentment that was never addressed. In some cases, your spouse may not even fully understand why they feel the way they do. They might say they hate you, but what they truly hate could be the feeling of being misunderstood, dismissed, neglected, or betrayed, even if you didn't mean to cause that hurt. It's also possible that the hate you're experiencing isn't really about you at all. Your spouse may be projecting their own internal struggles outward. If they're carrying shame, stress, regret, or personal wounds, they may be using you as a mirror for their pain. They lash out not because you are the enemy, but because you are the nearest, safest, or most familiar person available to absorb their frustration. This doesn't make it fair or justified, but it does make it human. And understanding that helps you shift from reacting in pain to responding with clarity. That's why the first and most important step in turning hate into love is to stop fighting the surface emotion and start seeking the heart underneath it. This requires tremendous patience, courage, and emotional maturity. It means resisting the urge to strike back, defend yourself immediately, or demand fairness. Instead, it invites you into a deeper emotional posture, the posture of a listener, of a seeker, of someone willing to say, I want to understand what you're really feeling, even if it hurts me to hear it. To do this well, you have to lean into empathy. You need to ask yourself questions like, what could my spouse be carrying that I don't see? What pain have they possibly buried? When did they start to withdraw, and what might have triggered it? This isn't an exercise in blame. It's an exercise in insight. Because once you begin to understand what's beneath the hate, you begin to see not a cruel enemy, but a hurting human. And when you see your spouse as hurting, the path to compassion opens. And compassion is the bridge back to connection. And the most powerful things you can do in this moment is to truly listen. If your spouse is willing to talk, even if their words are angry or sharp, listen not to defend, but to understand. Don't interrupt. Don't correct. Don't try to fix their feelings with logic or explain away their hurt with justifications. That almost never works. What works is presence. Calm, quiet presence that says, even if you hate me right now, I'm strong enough to hear you. I care enough to want to know your truth, and I won't use your pain against you. You might be surprised by what begins to surface. Sometimes your spouse doesn't even know how much they've been suppressing. And when they finally feel like they're being heard, not controlled, not managed, not dismissed, something begins to change in them. The defensive walls they've built to protect their pain may slowly begin to lower. They may still lash out for a while, but over time, the very act of being heard becomes healing. And you, as the listener, become a source of safety instead of conflict. There's one more thing you must accept if you're going to see through the hate and begin the journey toward love. Your spouse's emotions, no matter how painful, are real to them. They may be based on misunderstandings or distorted memories. They may not be the whole truth. But to them in this moment, those feelings are valid and overwhelming. So don't argue about what's real. Focus instead on what they feel. When you validate their experience, even if you don't agree with it, you're saying, your emotions matter. You matter. And that message can start to break through even the most hardened heart. This kind of emotional work is not easy. It may be one of the most difficult things you'll ever do, but it is also one of the most Christ-like, loving, and transformational things you can do in a broken marriage. When you stop reacting to the hate and start responding to the pain underneath it, you become the light in the darkness. And that light, small as it may seem at first, is often the first flicker of hope that love can, in fact, rise again. When your spouse starts to withdraw emotionally, or worse, express hatred toward you, it's natural to panic. That panic doesn't always look loud and dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet desperation. You may find yourself doing everything you can to pull them back, pleading with them to talk, texting long emotional messages, begging for one more chance, crying in front of them, asking what you did wrong, or trying to reason with their anger. These responses are deeply human, born from the desire to save what feels like it's slipping away. But as difficult as it is to hear, these efforts almost always backfire. They don't bring your spouse closer, they push them further away. Why? Because desperation never attracts. When you beg, argue, or chase, what your spouse sees is fear, not strength. And in a time when they are likely already emotionally overwhelmed, the added pressure makes them feel cornered or suffocated. You may be acting out of love, but it comes across as control. The more you chase, the faster they run. The more you argue, the more they dig in. And the more you plead, the less they respect your emotional stability. This is one of the hardest truths I teach in my work with couples. The path back to love is not paved with emotional pursuit, but with emotional strength. When your spouse is caught in a season of hate, the last thing they need is to feel manipulated, guilted, or overwhelmed by your fear. What they need, even if they don't know it yet, is to see you standing tall, grounded, and dignified. That quiet strength may not melt their heart overnight, but it will begin to shift the power dynamic that has become toxic and imbalanced. And let's be honest, when you beg or argue, it doesn't feel good, does it? You may walk away from those interactions feeling smaller, ashamed, or even more rejected than before. That's because in trying to win them back through panic, you're abandoning your own self-respect. You're letting your worth be defined by their behavior. And in doing so, you lose yourself in the process. Instead, what if you chose something radically different? What if you chose to love them from a position of quiet power, not loud persuasion? What if instead of chasing them with emotional chaos, you became a calming presence in their storm? That doesn't mean becoming cold or shutting them out. It means you love with wisdom. You love with boundaries. You love in a way that says, I care deeply about you, but I will not lose myself to win you. That kind of love is incredibly powerful, because here's the irony. The less you beg, the more your spouse begins to wonder about your strength. The less you argue, the more they may question their assumptions. The more calm and secure you become, the more they start to see the version of you they once admired, or perhaps the version they never fully appreciated. You become not the needy one trying to force connection, but the steady one who offers peace instead of pressure. Now, I know this isn't easy. When the person you love seems to hate you, every fiber in your being screams to fix it, to say something, to do something. But emotional discipline is your greatest ally in this moment. It tells you to pause, to breathe, to act with wisdom rather than desperation. And in that pause, you reclaim your power. You stop feeding the cycle of conflict and start introducing a new energy into the relationship, an energy of confidence, peace, and quiet love. This is not a game. You're not pretending not to care. You do care deeply, but caring doesn't mean chaos. It means having the courage to love in a healthy way. It means respecting yourself while also extending grace to your spouse. It means choosing to be an anchor, not a storm. So if you've been chasing, pleading, or arguing, stop, not out of bitterness, not to punish, but because you are worthy of being loved, not pitied. Because love isn't something you drag out of someone. It's something that awakens when it feels safe and inspired. And the safest, most inspiring love is always the one that comes from strength. Remember this, you are not powerless. You have more influence than you realize. But that influence grows when you stop trying to force change and start living from the kind of integrity and calm that invites change. Let your steadiness speak. Let your peace become the most powerful response to their pain. That's when hearts begin to soften. That's when hate begins to fade. And that's when love, true healing, lasting love, can begin to return. One of the most frustrating experiences in a broken marriage is feeling like you're constantly hitting a wall. You try to talk, only to end up in the same argument. You try to show love, only to be ignored. You try to explain your pain, only to be misunderstood or dismissed. The cycle repeats itself over and over until it feels like there's no point in trying anymore. You begin to believe the only way things will ever get better is if they change, if they finally see what they're doing, if they wake up, soften, or come back to reason. That longing is completely understandable, but it's also the very thing that keeps many people stuck. Because here's the truth. You cannot force your spouse to change. You can't make them love you. You can't control their emotions, their decisions, or their journey. But that doesn't mean you're helpless. Far from it. You have immense power, not over the person, but over the pattern. And when you change the pattern, you change the entire dance of the relationship. Every relationship has a pattern, a rhythm of interaction that becomes almost automatic over time. You say this, they say that. You withdraw, they get louder. They accuse, you defend. You try harder, they pull away. This cycle becomes deeply ingrained, and before long, both of you are reacting to each other instead of responding from your heart. It's no longer about love. It's about survival. It's about winning. It's about avoiding pain or proving a point. And in that kind of emotional climate, love cannot breathe. So what do when you can't change the person? You change the pattern. And that begins with you. When you start responding differently, more calmly, more openly, more securely, you interrupt the cycle. When you choose not to escalate, not to retaliate, not to fall into the same reactions you always have, you create space, emotional space. And in that space, something new can begin to emerge. Imagine this. Your spouse comes at you with anger, expecting you to defend yourself or get emotional, but instead of taking the bait, you respond with a gentle, grounded tone. You acknowledge what they're saying without feeding the fire. Or maybe your spouse withdraws again, expecting you to chase them, cry, or plead, but this time you don't. You simply give them space while living your life with quiet confidence and kindness. These subtle shifts may not change everything overnight, but they do begin to disarm the emotional traps that have kept you both stuck. People often ask, but what if I change and nothing happens? And my answer is this: the change is not just for them, it's for you. Because when you stop living in reaction mode, you reclaim your peace. You stop letting their behavior dictate your worth or your state of mind. You start becoming the kind of person who is whole, emotionally intelligent, and spiritually strong, regardless of how they behave. It's also important to remember that patterns are reinforced over time. If your spouse has come to expect conflict, coldness, or control from you, even unintentionally, it will take consistency to show them something different. They may not believe your change at first. They may test it. But if you hold steady, if you stay rooted in love and wisdom, eventually the walls can begin to come down. This isn't about pretending to be someone you're not. It's about choosing to grow into someone stronger, softer, and more self-aware. Someone who isn't tossed around by emotional chaos. Someone who doesn't need to dominate, fix, or be right in order to feel secure. Someone who can say, I love you enough to change the way I show up, even if you don't meet me there yet. Changing the pattern doesn't guarantee your spouse will respond right away, but it does guarantee that you're doing your part to shift the energy of your marriage from toxic to tender, from defensive to open, from destructive to healing. And sometimes all it takes is one person to change the rhythm before the other begins to hear the music differently. So don't waste your strength trying to change your spouse. Use that energy to change what you bring to the relationship. Let go of the old scripts. Show up with new responses. Replace defensiveness with empathy. Replace control with compassion. Replace despair with hope rooted in your own growth. When you change the pattern, you invite your spouse into a new kind of connection. You offer them something they haven't felt in a long time: safety. And where there is emotional safety, love has room to rise again, even after hate, even after distance, even after silence. You don't have to be perfect to do this. You just have to be willing. Willing to lead with humility, willing to respond with grace, and willing to believe that change is still possible, not by force, but by faithfulness to a better pattern. This may be the most humbling part of the journey, and yet it is also the most transformational. If your spouse has grown cold, distant, or even hateful, the natural instinct is to focus on them, their attitude, their behavior, their need to change. But the most powerful shift happens when you gently, honestly turn that mirror inward and ask a courageous question: am I still the person they once fell in love with? Or have I become someone even I wouldn't want to live with? That question is not meant to condemn you. It's meant to liberate you. Because when love starts to die in a marriage, it's rarely the fault of one partner alone. Often both people have changed, but not always in healthy ways. Over time, life wears on us. We get tired. We get comfortable. We stop trying. Maybe we stop listening. We start criticizing more. We grow distracted. We neglect romance. We let ourselves go emotionally or physically, or we let bitterness creep in. And even if your spouse's actions have wounded you deeply, you may still need to ask, have I also contributed to the breakdown in ways I haven't seen? This is not about guilt. It's about growth. It's about reclaiming the best version of who you are and offering that version back into the relationship. It's about becoming the person your spouse could love again, not by pretending or performing, but by returning to your most authentic, vibrant self. Think back. Who were you when your spouse fell in love with you? Were you confident, kind, playful, supportive, passionate? Have those qualities faded over time? Has stress, frustration, or unresolved conflict made you someone less approachable, more critical, more guarded? These are hard questions, but they are the kind that save marriages. What many people don't realize is that attraction, true lasting attraction, is not just about looks. It's about energy. It's about presence. It's about how you carry yourself and how you make your partner feel when they're around you. And when hate is in the air, it's usually because that emotional safety has eroded. Your spouse doesn't feel admired. They don't feel heard. They don't feel cherished. And perhaps, painful as it is to admit, you don't either. That's why becoming the person they could love again begins with healing yourself first. Not for them, but for you. Because when you become emotionally healthy, spiritually grounded, and self-aware, you don't just invite love back in, you inspire it. You become someone your spouse may not have seen in a long time, a person of strength and tenderness, a person of dignity and joy. A person they don't have to fight, run from, or be guarded around. The person they can trust, talk to, and maybe fall in love with again. That means taking care of your body, not for vanity, but as a reflection of self-respect. It means reconnecting with your passions, your sense of humor, your ability to laugh, to listen, to forgive. It means letting go of bitterness, even if your spouse hasn't yet earned your forgiveness. Because bitterness makes you heavy and hard, and love can't grow in a heart that's closed. Start with small steps. Wake up and pray. Move your body. Read something that nourishes your soul. Smile at yourself in the mirror, even if it feels awkward at first. Ask trusted friends for feedback on what blind spots you may have missed. Seek counseling or coaching if needed, not because you are broken, but because you are committed to healing. Because healing attracts healing. And here's what's beautiful. As you grow, your energy will shift. Your spouse may not say anything at first, but they'll notice. They'll see it in your posture and your patience and your peace. You won't need to beg for their attention. They'll begin to feel drawn to you again. not manipulated and not pushed, but magnetized by the steady, renewed presence you now bring into the home. Understand this deeply. Becoming the person your spouse could love again is not about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you were before the pain and becoming even more because of the pain, stronger, wiser, softer, more alive. You cannot guarantee your spouse will respond the way you hope, but you can become someone who radiates the kind of love that invites respect, safety, and connection. And that's where change begins. Not in chasing their heart, but in reclaiming your own. When you become that kind of person, not just once, but consistently, you don't just wait for love to come back, you lead it home. This is the part where so many give up, not because they're tired of trying, tired of waiting, tired of hurting, tired of carrying hope alone. And if that's where you are right now, I want to speak directly to your heart. Your pain is valid, but your patience still has power, because transformation, true, lasting transformation, takes time. It's easy to want immediate change. When your spouse is angry, when the tension in your home is heavy, when the silence feels suffocating, you just want relief. You want the moment where they suddenly wake up, break down in tears, say, "I was wrong," and wrap you in their arms again. That fantasy is natural, but real healing doesn't unfold like a movie scene. It unfolds slowly, sometimes silently. Sometimes you won't even know it's happening until one day something shifts. A softened glance, a brief conversation without tension, a small moment of peace where there was only chaos before. Those are the signs of movement. But they only come when you're willing to trust the process and walk through it without rushing the outcome. When a marriage is in crisis, especially when hate has entered the picture, there is often a deep emotional wound underneath. And wounds don't heal overnight. If you rush someone who's hurting, they close up even more. But if you give them space while still being a steady presence, you give them something they may not even know they need, the freedom to feel, to process, and to rediscover safety in your presence. That's why giving it time is not passive. It's active patience. It means showing up consistently. It means continuing to grow into the best version of yourself, not to prove anything, but to prepare yourself for the love you still believe in. It means not forcing conversations they're not ready for, but being emotionally available when they are. It means resisting the urge to measure progress by big dramatic moments and instead learning to recognize and celebrate the small victories along the way. You may be wondering, but how long? How much time should I give this? How do I know if I'm wasting my effort or waiting in vain? These are fair questions. There's no exact number, no calendar that guarantees a breakthrough by a specific date. But what I encourage you to do is set a time frame for yourself, not an ultimatum for your spouse, but a checkpoint for your own heart. Maybe it's 3 months, maybe 6. During that time, give your all to becoming who you were created to be: calm, strong, loving, joyful, and observe with wisdom, not with pressure, but with clarity. And here's what's powerful. Even if your spouse doesn't change within that window, you will. You'll emerge more grounded, more confident, more peaceful. And with that clarity, you'll be able to decide your next steps, not from fear, but from a place of strength. That's the difference between acting out of desperation and acting from wisdom. I also want to be honest. There will be days when it feels like nothing is working, days when the silence stretches too long, when the coldness feels unbearable, when you'll be tempted to walk away, lash out, or numb yourself to it all. On those days, remind yourself, the seeds you're planting don't sprout immediately, but that doesn't mean the soil is barren. Keep loving, keep living with dignity, keep walking in faith. Let God work on their heart in ways you can't see. Let your actions speak louder than your words. Let your transformation become the gentle evidence that love is still possible, not because you forced it, but because you embodied it. And here's the beautiful part. When love begins to return, and yes, it can, it's not the same love you had before. It's deeper, it's wiser, it's tested, it's chosen, not out of comfort, but out of conviction. That kind of love isn't fragile, it's fire refined. And it becomes the foundation for a marriage that isn't just restored, it's reborn. So take a deep breath. You don't have to fix everything today. You don't need to convince them of anything tonight. All you need to do is stay faithful to the process, because love, when it's real, is not rushed. It waits, it works, it weathers the storm, and so can you. There comes a moment, quiet and often unexpected, when something begins to shift. It doesn't come with fireworks or grand gestures. More often it shows up like a whisper, a softening of the eyes that once looked away in anger, a longer pause in a conversation that used to end in silence, a question asked with curiosity instead of contempt. This is the turning point, and though it may be small, it's the moment when the door to love creaks open just enough to let light back in. But let's be clear, this turning point rarely happens all at once. It is not the result of one perfect sentence or some flawless display of affection. It's born from consistency, from your quiet strength, your continued kindness, your emotional steadiness, when everything inside of you wants to scream or run. It's the fruit of choosing love when you don't feel it back yet, of remaining faithful to who you know you're becoming, even when your spouse is still figuring it out. And here's the beauty of that kind of love. It begins to disarm defenses. Your spouse may not know how to respond at first. They may even test you, waiting to see if this is real, if the changes in you will last, if the tenderness you're offering is just another way to manipulate. Don't take that as rejection. Take it as fear. Because sometimes when someone has been hurting for a long time, they don't trust peace when it finally arrives. They brace for the next fight. They expect the rug to be pulled out from underneath them. And so when they see a new version of you showing up, humble, consistent, calm, they're not always ready to believe it. Yet something in them notices, and something in them begins to shift. One of the first signs that love is beginning to return is engagement. Not romantic passion or a sudden confession of regret, but simple emotional engagement. Your spouse might start asking more questions. They might linger in the room a little longer. They might begin to express thoughts that are less guarded, less hostile. Don't rush to label these moments. Just honor them. Let them grow. Let your responses be filled with gentleness, not pressure, because pressure kills progress, but patience protects it. And as trust begins to rebuild, little by little, your spouse may start to remember not just the wounds, but the warmth, the laughter you once shared, the safety you once gave. They may still wrestle with anger or confusion, but underneath it, they'll start asking a question. They may not say out loud yet, could we really find our way back to each other? That question is sacred. And when it arises, even in the subtlest of ways, it's your invitation to keep showing up in love, not performing. Because you're not trying to impress them anymore. You're simply becoming someone they can relax around again. Someone they want to share space with, not avoid. Someone they can trust with their heart again, because you've shown that you're doing the work on your own heart too. But at this point, intimacy, emotional, spiritual, even physical, may slowly begin to reawaken. It's tender at first, fragile. Don't expect it to feel the way it once did right away. You're building something new, not returning to what was. And that's a good thing, because what you're building now is based on choice, not just chemistry. It's not fueled by infatuation or obligation, but by maturity, humility, and shared growth. During this phase, it's also important to be mindful of your expectations. You might find yourself hoping for dramatic reconciliations or tearful apologies, and while those things can happen, they often don't look like the movies. Sometimes your spouse won't say everything you long to hear, but their actions will begin to change. Sometimes they won't confess their past wrongs, but they'll treat you with new tenderness. It's progress. Receive it with gratitude instead of demanding more than they're ready to give. And above all, don't let fear hijack your progress. The moment love begins to return, fear often whispers, "Don't trust this. It won't last. They'll hurt you again." That fear is understandable, but it doesn't have to control you. You can choose to lean into hope without being naive. You can trust the process without letting your guard define your interactions. You can protect your heart while still opening it a little at a time, because real love, the kind that survives seasons of hate, is always a dance of strength and vulnerability. The turning point is sacred. It's the moment when the ashes of what was begin to stir with the breath of what could be. When you see it, don't rush it. Don't overanalyze it. Don't demand it turn into something huge overnight. Just honor it, nurture it, let it grow. This is where hope becomes reality, where pain begins to soften, where distance begins to close, and where love, once thought dead, begins to rise again. Not because everything is perfect, but because two hearts are starting to move toward each other again, step by cautious step. That is the miracle you've been waiting for. And it's closer than you think. If you've made it this far, if you've walked through the hurt, wrestled with the silence, and chosen not to retaliate, but to love with strength, then I want to say something that you may not hear often enough. You are incredibly brave. Because it takes deep courage to love someone who doesn't seem to love you back. It takes strength to stay when the easy thing would be to run. It takes faith to believe in the possibility of restoration when everything around you feels broken beyond repair. And yet, here you are, choosing not to let hate define your story, choosing to become someone who doesn't just long for love, but lives in love, even when it costs you. That choice will never be wasted. You see, love, real love, it's not just a feeling, it's a decision, an action, a series of choices made day after day. It's not weak, it's not passive. It is perhaps the most powerful force on earth. It rebuilds what was torn down. It melts bitterness. It heals what logic says cannot be healed. And yes, even after hate has taken hold, love can be reborn, not because you forced it, but because you became it. But don't mistake this for a promise of instant results. Rebuilding a marriage where hate once lived takes time, patience, and discernment. There may still be setbacks, there may be more tears, but through it all you will become stronger, wiser, more grounded in grace. Because you didn't just survive, you grew. And that growth, even if your spouse never fully comes back, will serve you for a lifetime. It will shape how you love others, how you parent, how you heal, and how you live. For those of you still waiting to see change, waiting for hearts to soften, waiting for a sign that it's working, I want to encourage you, keep walking in love. But don't lose yourself. Don't pour from an empty cup. Stay anchored in prayer. Surround yourself with truth tellers, not just comforters. And let God do what only He can do. The softening of hearts, the untangling of confusion, the miracle of redemption. And if the day comes when your spouse turns back to you, even just a little, Receive it with gratitude, not bitterness. Don't use their past against them. Don't make them pay for their silence. Let grace lead the way. Because in a marriage, the goal isn't to win, it's to restore. And when restoration happens, it is one of the most breathtaking things you'll ever witness. But even if that day doesn't come the way you imagined, know this, you are not alone. God sees every tear, every sleepless night, every moment you chose kindness over retaliation. And he is shaping something in you that no circumstance can take away. To hold on to love, to faith, to the vision of what could still be, not out of desperation, but out of conviction. Because when you choose to love with wisdom, with boundaries, with truth and grace, you become a vessel for healing, not just for your marriage, but for your life. This is the work of reconciliation. This is the path of redemption. And this fierce, unrelenting, patient love is how hate turns back into love. You're not done. Your story isn't over. Keep walking. The turning point may be closer than you think.